Welcome to Beyond the Mask. Today we're joined by two familiar names who never fail to bring clarity and candor to the conversation, Randy Moore and Adam Spiegel. They've both been here before, and they're back to help us make sense of the ever-evolving anesthesia ecosystem. From workforce pressures and reimbursement shifts to private equity, consolidation, and regulatory headwinds, what exactly is going on in our space right now? And just as importantly, where are we headed? In this episode, Randy and Adam break down the key forces at play in the industry, share what they're seeing behind the scenes, and offer their perspectives on how CRNAs and anesthesia groups can stay agile, aligned, and ahead of the curve.
CRNA Financial Planning is a sponsor of Beyond the Mask podcast, investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group. Nothing in this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Plus, did you know listening to our podcast can earn you Class B credits? For details on how to submit, visit the CE credit section at beyondthemaskpodcast.com. Welcome to Beyond the Mask, innovation and opportunities for CRNAs and advanced practice nurses, with certified financial planner Jeremy Stanley and CRNA Sharon Pierce. Jeremy Stanley has worked with CRNAs for more than 23 years, and Sharon Pierce is a former president of the AANA and the NCANA. Join us as we leave the operating room and learn the latest in the CRNA and advanced practice nurse industries. Beyond the Mask starts in 10, 9, 8, 7.
Guys, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's good to see you guys.
It's great to be back.
Good to have you. We get to do this about once a year. I'm pretty excited about it. I always enjoy it. So for our listeners who might not know who you guys are, let's kind of just do a brief background, and we'll start with you, Adam.
Sure. I'm Adam Spiegel. I'm the CEO of NorthStar. Been CEO since 2018. And prior to that, spent about 25 years with a company called the Advisory Board, and we were bought by Optum. So I spent a very short period of time being owned by United Healthcare.
Well, that's a loaded statement.
I was going to say, we could go down that. Yeah. All right, Randy?
I'm Randy Moore. I'm Adam's boss at North. Just kidding. I am the Chief Anesthetist Officer and also the Executive Vice President of Clinical Strategy at NorthStar. I just finished my 4th year, believe it or not, at the firm. So it's been a wild and exciting and fun ride. And my job is to be laser focused on, honestly, making sure we have the leadership infrastructure in the company to support our clients and our patients, as well as, positioning us as a destination employer for nurse anesthetists and anesthesiologists.
And for those that don't know, Randy is a CRNA as well, and he used to be, in a past life, the CEO of the ANA.
That's right.
Has a lot of experience in CRNA matters. So, and we always get into this, but where are we right now? I mean, here we are. 2025, markets have shifted a little bit in certain areas, but you still see a lot of demand out there. Maybe not quite as much supply as even was projected. So let's get into that today. So kind of give us the current state of where we are.
So, I think things are getting better. A little bit of a continuation of what we saw last year. The way we tend to think about the supply demand, you sort of start with locums. And what you find is that locums rates are actually trending down, which for the first time in a very long time. So it doesn't mean that people aren't using them, but the rates are coming down. W-2 wages continue to go up, but not nearly at the pace that we saw sort of 24 months ago. So at a high level, we are seeing that the sort of demand supply, while there's still an imbalance, it's not quite as imbalanced as it was before. And we're certainly finding that, as opposed to constantly putting out fires, we're able to pull up a little bit more and a lot more really stable sites than we would have had 3 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because you're seeing all kinds of ways of dealing with the locums rates. You're seeing hospital facilities say if you live within 50 miles, you can't work here, and they're bringing people in from the outside. But ultimately, they're paying more than they were to those folks. You're seeing the strategies, like you said, of the pay the W-2 more to keep them enticed and engaged. and that lessens your focus on locums. So I think there's a lot of strategies out there like that. I mean, and we're not saying that 1099 is drying up by any means. It's definitely not. But I think what we're seeing is those rates are not going up as much. They're stabilizing. I want to get back to what you said. You said you're seeing locums rates go down. Can you expound upon that a little bit?
Yeah, what you're seeing in these markets is that it's more competitive, to your point. So now what used to be you're fighting, you're bidding against, say, another hospital to get that locum. Now the locum is sort of like, well, I'd be willing to go down to beat another locum in the market.
Gotcha.
So it's like if I was getting, $300 an hour before, well, you got another offer for $280. How about I'll meet you at $280?
Gotcha.
And now you're starting to see that the same amount of time, you're seeing that those hourly rates are coming down a little bit for locums. And you're also seeing from a W-2 perspective, old locum used to be, as Randy says, staying in a Red Roof Inn and I'm traveling around and It's not a real fun life.
That's not it anymore.
Now it's been, I get to sleep in my own bed and go to the same facility I went to before, but just get paid more money. Those gigs are going away.
I mean, this is the CRNA community we're talking about now, but I'm just interested, what are you seeing on the MD side, the physician anesthesiologist? Is it the same? Are you seeing more? Because I hear a lot of feedback that anesthesiologists are getting more on the locum side than they were getting. Is that true?
I don't think that's really true. I think you're seeing that in subspecialties. So CV, anesthesia, pediatric, those things, yes, you are seeing that those are hard to find. But I think on the run-of-the-mill anesthesiologist, I'd say it's even more stable than what we're seeing on the CRNA side.
Okay, interesting. Randy, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the audience who are listening in and trying to decipher what our position is on locums, and there always will be a clear and compelling need for locum tenens clinicians, and I think they serve a really valuable need. I think what we saw peak COVID and then for a couple of years after that was sustainable amount of locum tenens utilization. Or unsustainable amount, I should say. And now you're seeing a lot of groups who have relied heavily on locum tenens labor start to make decisions about decreasing rates or eliminating locums. And that's the natural cycle. That's how it's supposed to work. Meaning that if a site has a locum tenens or locum tenens for 2 years, there's something profoundly broken there. That should not be the case, right? So locum tenens are an important solve for short-term problems. They should never be positioned as a long-term solution. And what we've seen is that, people have short memories or selective memories around around this stuff. And what we're seeing now, and I think, probably even more so at NorthStar, because I think we do a better job on the recruit and retention front, is you're starting to see a pretty significant movement, especially in the metro and metro adjacent areas, away from locum tenens utilization.
It's interesting. I read your Substack articles that you put out there, and you put a lot of really good stuff out there. So those of you who aren't subscribed to that from Randy, please do it, because it's really good. And you mentioned being broken. I mean, I know plenty of facilities that have used locums for 3-5 years, and I'm thinking of a big facility right now who their inpatient is only staffed at 45% of where they need to be. Other facilities, and these are in bigger metropolitan areas. So it's broken, is what you're saying. I mean, there's a problem
wrong.
there.
And honestly, in those situations where it's a major medical center that's 40%, 50% locum for multiple years, people need to lose their jobs. Full stop. That's a leadership problem at the site level. So there's probably something going on with culture. There's probably something going on with one or more leaders at the site that is resulting in the fact that CRNAs and anesthesiologists don't want to work there unless you pay a premium. And you got to look yourself in the mirror and say, like if I am a CEO of that facility or managing that service line, to what degree am I helping or hurting what's going on here?
People don't leave bad jobs. They leave bad bosses.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
The last time we connected, we discussed the CRNA shortage. How are things going now? You say there's some stabilization there. I don't know. We're walking around through the exhibit hall here, and we're still seeing plenty of job availability. We want to hear your predictions for 2026. Good God, 2026.
Well, I think it's evolving, and you can see it play out. So if you look at the supply-demand dynamics, what is happening on the CRNA in particular is the supply is responding. Meaning, the number keeps moving. I've heard anywhere from 150 to 153 nurse anesthesia programs are currently accredited today.
Yeah.
And another number that keeps moving is there's somewhere around 15 to 18 capability review.
Yeah.
Now, we all know that it takes a long time from, hey, I want to start a nurse anesthesia program to you graduate your first cohort. That could be 5 or 6 years if you're sprinting. So if you extrapolate that out and say, geez, look at this in 2030, we're probably going to be seeing somewhere on the order of 5,000 graduates a year from CRNA programs. Now, the demand dynamics are going to be unchanged. The market is still very much in need of CRNA talent, whether it's in the ambulatory surgery center or the hospital setting. So I think there is, folks are going to retire or folks are going to slow down, and workforce projections are inherently complex and flawed. But my sense is, as we look at this, 25 feels like the year that we kind of got on our front foot from a staffing perspective as an organization. 26 is going to be even more so. We're going to have hotspots within our platform where it's a startup, or maybe a site has been destabilized because we didn't keep our eye on the ball from a leadership or cultural perspective and we lost people. But if you kind of look at how we're doing writ large, my projection is it's going to be more and more stable in the out years.
We're talking about more schools, obviously coming on, 150 schools, 15, in the works per se. I mean, these are not the CRNAs that you grew up with, that Sharon grew up with. These are different personalities. And what we're finding is that they want different things. And one of those is, yes, they want to make money, but they want to be flexible. They don't want to work 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week. They want to go do their job. They want to have fun. They want to enjoy life. It's a different cultural shift, and they're not afraid to ask you for what they want. So as you look out and pontificate, I mean, obviously you guys are in that business. How do you deal with that? Is it more flexible schedules? Is it offering 1099 and W-2 in the same facility and giving them choices? What does that look like as we move forward?
I'll start. Maybe Adam can jump in. I think what we've come to an understanding, maybe longer, it's taken longer than it should have, is that you really need to meet these people with where they're at. We make generalizations, I do it too, about the early career CRNAs, but there are early career CRNAs that want to work and want to earn.
Yeah,
there are also folks who are more lifestyle oriented. They want to start a family, or maybe they want to do things outside of anesthesia. And as we look at how we model a performer at a facility or how we design our schedule, we always have an eye towards how do we develop a win-win where we want to recruit and retain the people who are lifestyle oriented, meaning they probably want to take minimal call and do their job, do an excellent job, but also create shifts and opportunities for individuals who want to earn, who want to optimize their compensation because they're at the stage in life where they feel like that's important. And I think the more organizations embrace that and become creative with how they recruit, retain, and how they design their schedules, the more likely you're going to win those folks over.
What Randy said.
What Randy said. All right, that's good. That's good.
I've never seen him speechless before. So
you left him speechless.
So
that was great.
Profoundly stupid or helpful. I'm not sure.
and Randy, I think those are all great points. And to your point, I didn't mean to generalize and say that all this generation is, because obviously there are a lot of young CRNAs out there who work very, very hard and are willing to work even harder than any of us in this room. But, I think the trend in what we see is that, they want a different type of work-life balance and a different work structure. And we're seeing that all through the economy. It's not just anesthesia. It's not just medical. I mean, there's different ways that this younger generation views things, and it's not the same as we did. And any company that doesn't pick up on that and adapt to that, they're going to be in trouble. So, I totally agree with that.
Are there any other trends that you guys are seeing?
Yeah, I mean, the big things that we're starting to see is movement to outpatient is continuing to accelerate. And I think what's hard about that is a little bit back to this lifestyle point. As a CRNA, ASCs used to be a lifestyle choice. You got paid a little bit less, but you didn't work quite as hard. You're out at 3, no nights, no weekends. Well, now these ASCs are running until 5, 6 o'clock at night.
Yes, they are.
They're back to back to back to back. You're running weekends. So it's a different world out there, and they're continuing to take volume. I generally think this is really good for CRNAs because I think we're finding that because rates are going up, reimbursement continues to be challenging, it's hard to not have a stipend in an ASC. nowadays. And because of that, there's a lot more willingness to look at different models. CRNA only is oftentimes one of the ways that you need to go. And I think that's going to create continued opportunities for CRNAs from a scope of practice perspective.
Now, are y'all seeing it in smaller institutions, maybe regionalized, but where I'm at with smaller hospitals are going back to CRNA only?
There is definitely a focus on hospitals are trying to get their arms wrapped around their own margin and how can they provide outstanding clinical services at a, from an anesthesia perspective. And if you look at the line items, we are, when I say we, I'm talking about the royal we, anesthesia, we are, often the most expensive or one of the most expensive line items on any facility's P&L. And so it's totally natural, understandable, and reasonable to say, can we do this more cost effectively? So maybe we have an all-physician model and we need to bring CRNAs in. Or maybe we have a medical direction model that's strictly 1-3 or 1-4. Should we loosen that up and do QZ facilitated billing and do 1-6 or 1-7? And in some facilities are definitely moving in the direction of, well, I don't think it makes sense from a cultural, operational, financial, patient complexity perspective to have an anesthesiologist. And yeah, we're seeing that for sure. I think the way that we approach that conversation is we do it in a very consultative way. These are the pluses and these are the minuses. These are your options. This is what we recommend. And this is how we would, approach the change management. And sometimes we would advise against it because there's not a compelling financial reason to do it. And the change management based on the culture at the site would be painful. So what we would say, it's not no, but not now.
Not now.
Let's take some time to think about how we do this. So those conversations happen all the time.
You just brought up something, really interesting. I mean, let's talk about QZ billing. I mean, we've seen a couple of health insurers, one of which was mentioned earlier, reducing payments to CRNA-only models. And let's talk through that. What does that look like? I mean, that makes it less enticing to have a CRNA model as long as that physician anesthesiologist, the pay makes it worth it. The numbers matter in that scenario. Is that 15% enough?
You got to think through all the implications of that. So if you sort of take that ASC example, if I can get a salaried physician working 55 hours a week as a salaried physician, and I'm comparing that where I'm getting 100% of reimbursement to getting 85% on somebody who's working 40-hour weeks, and let's say, it's hard for me to fully staff those CRNAs, then physician in room actually makes more economic sense because it's going to be a whole lot cheaper than a locum CRNA. So again, it does have a pretty big impact on economics. And, we always like to pick on United and I love doing it, but Anthem was doing it. Cygnus started it. And I just feel like we have not reacted well enough. And from a group perspective, it's very hard because our only recourse is to leave the contract entirely. Because on one hand, you're like, well, look, we have a contract where you pay me 100% out in if I'm using CRNA only, and they say, okay, well, then cancel the contract. And that means I've got to cancel the whole contract.
The whole contract.
And suddenly I'm now getting paid QPA instead of the rate that I got before. So I've got to make that trade-off and say, I'm going to take it because I'm still overall getting paid better than if I went out of network. And that's what's really hard about what they're doing right now.
And I think what you're saying is the numbers matter. They really do matter. And as I always say, I mean, anesthesia is a business. And for our CRNAs out there, you need to really understand that. I mean, yes, we've got patient care and health care, but this is a business. And, if you can find an anesthesiologist that will work 55 hours a week and fit into that model and the CRNAs are not there and you're getting 85%, it's a business. So you've got to do what you got to do there.
Are you a resident or CRNA looking to transition into independent practice? The AANA and Beyond the Mask are here to help you thrive as your own boss. Introducing the 1099 CRNA Institute, taught by Beyond the Mask host Jeremy Stanley and Sharon Pierce. This comprehensive educational series provides detailed guidance on business structure, legal and tax implications, and financial management, tailored specifically for 1099 CRNAs. Enroll now and earn valuable continuing education credits as you chart a new course in your rewarding career. Visit aana.com/1099 to learn more and take the first step toward your new future.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about PE, private equity and healthcare. Good, bad, indifferent. I mean, there's been some negative press about PE and healthcare.
What?
There's some unscrupulous situations that have gone on. I mean, I understand private equity, and I think there's good and bad to it. You want to elaborate on any of that and what's going on in that world, Adam?
Yeah, no, I think part of it is if you're going to put groups together, you often need capital to do so. And whether it's private equity, whether it's public companies, whether it's some rich dude that you've met on the street, like there's usually needs capital to fund a lot of these things. So it's a question of where that's coming from. I think the challenge with private equity that has historically been in our profession has been that they've kind of had one playbook, which is it's a cottage industry. 80% of anesthesia is provided by small independent providers. Well, let me put a bunch of them together, let them continue to do what they're doing, and I'm just going to get better price from payers. The problem is that playbook doesn't work anymore. So now you've got these, because I wasn't doing better anesthesia. I wasn't getting scale advantages from those different practices because they were all running the way they were before. My whole playbook was I'm going to put them together and get better price. Well, now, if I'm a big group like NorthStar or I'm an independent group, United doesn't care. They're going to pay us the same QPA rate, whether we're big or small. And so you've taken away all that negotiating leverage. So now you've kind of blown up the system. And that's where I think you get a lot of this private equity negativity right now, is that their strategy is no longer working.
Well, I mean, then their strategy turns to, well, if I can't get paid more, I've got to cut costs. And that's where we're starting to see, the negative press about private equity and how it works. And, it also comes back to, what the end result for the PE is going to be. I mean, if you're looking at a 3 to 7 year turn in this environment, that's pretty tough.
There's also, and it's easy to use private equity as a punching bag, and often, honestly, it deserves it. But I think if you look at why private equity is not working in anesthesia, even though a lot of regional and large anesthesia platforms have private equity, is because private equity, the traditional private equity. So you buy a company, think about like flipping a house, right? So you buy a house, you think this is a good neighborhood. I'm going to buy this house. I'm going to update the kitchen, update the primary, bedroom, and I'm going to sell it for whatever, 30% higher than what I bought it for. It works.
Right. And you levered it along the way.
Yeah. And so what's happened is that the ground has shifted underneath private equity, which is their competitive advantage has been, as Adam mentioned, based exclusively on their ability to negotiate on price. Well, that's gone. So now success as an anesthesia firm at whatever level you are at is predicated on your ability to be an excellent practice management company. And that's like hard stuff. Like, the boring stuff of, getting your revenue cycle situated, operational rigor in the, with your operations team, having great leadership, investing in leadership, firing poor leaders, identifying leaders and developing them over time. Like, these are things that don't deliver in a quarter or a year, or even sometimes in a 3 or 5 year cycle. So there's a fundamental kind of challenge here for traditional private equity. But there's a world where, like, private equity that has a long-term orientation says, like, we're going to buy an asset and we're going to keep it for 10 years or forever, then there is real value there. If you treat this as a company that you're going to make investments in and you're going to give up a little bit of margin on the front end, but know over time this thing's going to deliver consistent value, that's the sweet spot. The problem is there's a lot of firms that are in short-term private equity and their sponsors are trying to figure out how to get out right now. Was that any of that true?
That's very good. That's very good. I'm impressed.
I mean, it all makes logical sense, but and I think you hit the nail on the head with private equity. I mean, the traditional model, they go in, lever up, maybe sell some of the assets, lease the real estate back. I mean, those models are a little broken now. So, and you're right. I mean, that's the downside to private equity. Your model can move from underneath you really quickly. You're taking a lot of risk with PE sometimes. So
you guys have been with us 2 other years before, and we talk a lot about insourcing and outsourcing anesthesia services. What's changed over the last 3 years, and what do you see coming up in 2026?
Yeah, so I think you've seen probably, I'd say, coming into this year, there was a lot of focus on insourcing. And I think a lot of hospitals felt that look, I'm going to cut out the middleman. I'm reading the same stuff about private equity that, we all are. I'm seeing that, gosh, there's no real value here, and they're taking it in-house. And what they're finding is it's actually really hard to manage anesthesia.
Takes a little bit of expertise,
Complex.
I would think.
Exactly. And, we've run the numbers, but basically when a hospital insources anesthesia, they usually take on about 15% more cost, and they bring in 15 to 20% less revenue. And that's because, if I'm doing an orthopedic case that the facility fee is $45,000, the surgical fee is $25,000, and the anesthesia fee is $800, where am I going to focus my time and energy?
Sure.
It's not going to be on that $800, right? And then on the cost side, I'm going to listen to my surgeons say that we're not available. So let's make sure to hire lots of CRNAs and lots of anesthesiologists and use locums so that anytime they want a surgery, we can do it for them. Because technically from a hospital, I look at the paper and I say, I make money every time there's a surgery. So they end up spending 15% more on staff that they don't really need. And that's where, outsourced anesthesia makes sense. It's a good business. We should be able to drive a lot of value to those hospitals. And that's where you start to see a lot of those hospitals this year. And I think 26 is going to be a big year coming back and saying,
Maybe we're not as efficient.
yeah, can anybody take this anesthesia from me?
Yeah, let me ask you a question about that real quick, because I have seen this happen at a hospital that I work at. The orthopods are like, we want 12-hour shifts. So we start staffing 12-hour, one person, 12 hours every day, because you got to have somebody else free for OB. So you got 2 CRNAs sitting there. And then 3 months later, the utilization is next to nothing. You might have one day that they go over. And what happened is the OR team schedule didn't mesh with the anesthesia schedule. All the CRNAs were getting upset. A lot of young moms, they don't want to work 12 hours. All of this, a lot of angst. I said, wait 3 months. This is going to go away. This is my question. Do you feel like that when anesthesia is outsourced, there's more conversations that occur, whereas hospital people will not go and say, hey, listen, this is just not going to work. You're being an asshole and you want what you want when you want it, but let me show you the numbers. And I don't know this answer.
But I do think that one of the advantages of outsourcing for hospital executives is that you have somebody coming to them and saying, here's the trade-off, which is if you don't hit this volume, this is going to cost you a whole lot of money to move to those 12-hour shifts. And if you look at the past, you've never hit those volumes. So what exactly is going to happen that's different based on what's been happening in the past? Inside a hospital, it's political. So they're like, all right, well, the orthopods say that and the orthopods run the roost, so I'm not going to even mention that. And so I think on the outsource side, sometimes we have to play the bad guy, but that's actually really valuable to hospital administrators. And so they can blame anesthesia.
Yeah, blame anesthesia. Sounds familiar.
Boy, that's a shocker.
So I just want to go back to two things. One, Randy, you said something earlier, and then Adam, I heard you say it as well. And the cost of anesthesia services and anesthesia providers is one of the most expensive in any hospital facility. And I think that's true. It's one of the most subsidized in the hospital. But for our listeners who might not know, can we explain why that is? What percentage of revenue is derived from surgical services? And in the future, I'll kind of loop that back in, do we see that continuing?
Yeah, so if you look at a very high level, hospitals make about 70% of their margin on surgery, which is 30% of what they do. So it hugely drives hospital margin. So that's why it's really important. So on the one hand, it's like, gosh, you got to be careful about how much these guys are subsidizing us. At the same time, in the overall version of a hospital economics, it's a drop in the bucket relative to what they're making on surgery. What we've seen change is if you think about $1 that you pay a CRNA in salary, before COVID, that was probably 30 cents was the hospital, 25 cents was the hospital, and an average hospital with fine payer mix. It's now over 50 cents. So the reimbursement that we get from the patients that a CRNA is seeing on a day is covering less than half of their salary. So that's what the hospital's having to pay to keep those CRNAs running, which is why you see that number keeps going up, and they don't like it because it's a big number. but they need to run surgery, so they don't really have a choice.
So I mean, they're in a conundrum here. I mean, what do you do? I mean, if 70% of your profit per se is coming from these surgical procedures, and you've got to have CRNAs or anesthesia running in there, and you have to subsidize it, and even if that continues to go up, at what point, I mean, something's got to give at some point, right? I mean, what does that look like in the future?
Well, there are definitely hospital executives who are figuring it out. They're sophisticated, they're using data-driven decision-making, and you're talking to someone who's sophisticated when they say something like, I'm actually interested in decreasing my points of service right now because the surgical volume doesn't support the amount of utilization. Now, that is completely counterintuitive to your typical hospital executive who, if there was such thing as a CEO school for hospitals, on day one, they would say, blow out your OR capacity, open up the doors, because if you build it, they will come. What you're seeing is like really smart operators are saying, well, hang on, not all surgical volume is good volume from a financial perspective. And I am open to increasing my OR capacity in incremental costs of bringing on CRNAs and docs and oh, by the way, the surgery staff, if there's a business justification for it. And they will look at and say, all right, this particular service line is delivering a significant amount of margin. I want to double down on that. This other surgical line is we're losing money on it. So either we do it understanding it's charity or we're going to stop doing it. And so what you're seeing is there's kind of a segmentation, which is like there's the old school dummy way of doing it, which is like blow out capacity, pay whatever you need to do in order to fight for the surgeon market share. And then there's smarter operators who are making data-driven decisions. And I've often heard Adam talk about this as the rationalization of points of service. And so we're seeing smart operators who want to grow. They're not anti-growth, but they're growing in a disciplined way, and they're going to make investments incrementally in the point of service coverage in a way that doesn't result in a ton of wasted labor.
Do you ever foresee, and Sharon, I'm sorry I'm talking, this is
No,
kind of my
I
jam,
know.
but
I do this every year with you three. It's okay. It doesn't hurt my feelings.
do you see a scenario where, I mean, we're talking about three people in that equation, really. I mean, you're talking about the hospital and administration, you're talking about anesthesia, and you're talking about surgeons. Do you ever see a scenario where the hospital has enough chutzpah to go to the surgeons and say, hey, we need some back from you? And is that happening? And how does that go?
So what I'd say is that, is it happening? Very, very rarely.
Right.
So it's not happening now. I think what you're seeing where Randy talked about is that if it's a surgeon who, as opposed to saying this is a high volume surgeon, they say this is a profitable surgeon. That's a very nuanced but important differentiation, because there's a lot of volume they take that they lose money on. And it's this idea of like, boy, this orthopod took all of their cases to their ASC. I want to bring them back, so I'm going to give them primetime utilization. And that orthopod says, great, I wanted some place to take all my Medicaid patients and my dual eligibles.
And that's what happened.
The really complex cases that I can't do in my ASC, I'll do that in my, primetime OR slot. And so you've got to figure out, and you say to that guy, well, if you're going to get that spot, I need this commercial mix. And that is not happening right now, but I think we're seeing that at least the sophisticated hospitals are looking at it and saying, well, how much profit are we actually making on these cases, not just what's the volume of those cases?
I mean, that just makes logical sense to me at this point. I mean, I know,
never
the
thought
surgeons
about
are
it.
the big bad bears. I mean, you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. But at some point, I mean, these surgeons obviously are making a lot of money, and to each their own. That's great for them. But at some point, you've got to kind of clamp down on that and go, I mean, in my mind anyway.
This is Jackie Rolls, President of the International Federation of Nurse Anesthetists. I'm inviting you to attend the 15th World Congress for Nurse Anesthetists, May 7th through 9th, 2026 in Brisbane, Australia. I promise you that you will love meeting nurse anesthetists from around the world, attending the multitude of Congress sessions, and exploring the many unique experiences that Brisbane has to offer. Hold a koala bear, feed kangaroos directly from your hand, climb Story Bridge, one of the only 3 climbing bridges in the world, or travel to snorkel the Great Barrier Reef. This is one Congress you do not want to miss. Cheers!
The problem is this is such a difficult problem because no one owns it in the end. And so if you think about the three big stakeholders in this discussion, there's the surgeon, who is the prophet, like the rainmaker. Then there is anesthesia, right? And then there is the hospital executive. And because usually you don't, the director or the managers of perioperative services, they're going to be oriented in a direction of pleasing the surgeon because of the obvious reasons, right? And no one really owns this problem because and the incentives are misaligned. Where anesthesia says like, hey, like we want to grow too, but we want to grow in a way that's smart. And we're taking on, financial risk here if we have, shitty, bad point of service utilization.
Same thing.
Surgeons don't care
Right.
what
No.
the OR utilization is. All they want to know is that they have 3 flip rooms for 4 cases. Honestly, if I was a surgeon, I'd feel the same damn way. And so the hospital executive is conflicted because they both want to control costs but also grow their volume. And they have to take a bet on, am I going to be cost-oriented now or am I going to be growth-oriented, and hope that the surgeon or the surgeons who promised them the sky in terms of all the cases they're going to bring actually deliver. And that's why there's such a difficult dynamic that exists within that triad of stakeholders.
So what happens? I mean, we're in a different environment now. You've got GLPs. You've got, potential for healthcare to change to some extent and volumes to go down. Let's pontificate in that scenario. People get a little healthier. Your volume goes down. What happens?
I mean, I think for anesthesia companies, it's great because then you're going to have an oversupply of anesthesia providers. And then now I don't have to pay locum rates. I'm sort of able to staff relatively easily. It's probably good news for insourced hospitals because now it's not so hard to hire up on the anesthesia side. And I can do that. So I think that would be a big change to anesthesia as it is right now, because you sort of fast forward, Randy would say, we're headed in that direction anyway. This is always a cycle. We're graduating more and more people, but you've had this demand continue to accelerate. And I think if that demand took a nosedive, it's not great for anesthesia provider comp, but it's pretty good for people who are running practices.
Randy, is that likely to happen, do you think, at some point? Or what do you think?
My sense is, though, so in the people are getting healthier and living longer argument, and there's like another conversation around AI that's super nerdy that maybe we can do at a different time. But even if you are healthier and you're living longer, you're going to require medical care over a longer period of time.
More maintenance.
Yeah, so maintenance. So think about I joked earlier in the talk, think about all the colonoscopies and cataracts and the knee scopes. So these individuals, even though they're healthier, hopefully, they're going to continuously need medical care. So I think that prolongation of life doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to fall off the cliff in terms of demand. There's a world where that demand is going to go out into the out, or it's going to continue into the out years, which I think is likely going to happen. And it's a good problem for us to have, honestly.
Yeah,
I mean, if people are getting healthier and we can prolong longevity, and we can decrease the demand for the surgeries where people they have so many comorbidities that they're showing up very sick and they're needing surgeries that, are high risk for them. If we can ameliorate that to some degree, that is awesome. But it doesn't obviate the need for what we need, for anesthesia services. So I'm pretty glass half full. I guess it depends on what hat I'm wearing right now as a CRNA or as a corporate executive. I tend to think that this is not going to be as big a deal as people say it is. And that's my hunch in terms of that. And I think the outcome's going to be good, just like I'm half glass full on AI too.
We talked a lot about models over the last couple of years. What are y'all seeing what trends are you seeing with anesthesia models right now?
I mean, I think the big thing that we're seeing is because you're seeing this volume to ASCs, because you're seeing stipends increase, I think you're seeing much more flexible models in the ASC area. And I think, it's one of those funny things where the surgeon may demand the anesthesiologist in the hospital, but the ASC that they own, very open to cheaper models of care.
Yeah.
So I think
interesting how that
it's amazing
works.
how that works. But I think what you see is a lot of these surgeon-owned practices are like, I don't want to, if there's a model that works, I'm willing to think about it. And so a lot more openness to either care teams or more flexible CRNA-only models in the ASC space. I think in the hospital space, what you're probably seeing is more areas of like supervision on NORA sites as opposed to running strictly medical direction. Similar reasons. It's just not cost effective to do medical direction in an endo suite. And so we're seeing that more models are having flexibility there.
It reminds me of the Charlie Munger quote, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. So, in the ASC space, the incentive is, this is no surprise to anyone, but it's a more profit. It's a for-profit enterprise.
Yeah.
People
exactly.
don't
It's a business,
build,
Randy. It's a business.
So, I think, in a world where economics are even more important, you're going to see the incentives play out in that way. And that means CRNAs. What is the big question in my mind, and I don't pretend to know the answer definitively, is on this reimbursement stuff that we've been talking about. So the 15%, is that the starting point or the ending point?
Right.
And so that's a big bogey potentially. And in a world where, as Adam mentioned earlier, the reimbursement headwinds continue to increase for CRNAs, you will see that impact models. And there's a potential for that to impact demand for CRNAs over time. I don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but I do see enough blood in the water to be concerned about where this is going to take the profession.
And there's government intervention there that we don't know about. Obviously anti-discrimination. There's a lot going on with that. None of us really know, but to me, it's an opening salvo. Do you ask for more than what you want and then negotiate back? Or is just this kind of the first tip in the water and say, well, if they'll let this go, maybe they'll let 20 go and 25.
Well, to be clear, so in 2023, Cigna did this.
Yeah.
The exact same playbook across their platform, decreased. And people were watching. Next thing you know, Anthem did it. Was it Mutual of Ohio did it?
Yeah, Mutual of Ohio.
Yeah, and now, shocker, United Healthcare. This reminds me of like the first airline that started to charge for checked luggage. Like 8 minutes later, the other airlines followed suit. So there is a cascading set of events here that could be highly problematic. And I'm not trying to be like, I'm not trying to catastrophize this, but this is entirely predictable. And my concern is, are we going to be able to stop this cascade or not? And why 15%? Why stop there? Why, if you were United Healthcare, would you stop at 15?
No,
I wouldn't.
Not if I can get away with
So
it.
I think we need to be clear-eyed about the real risk here and the fact that, this is going to be a moving target for them, I think, in my opinion.
All right, as we kind of look out, next 1 to 2 years, what are the risks? What are the opportunities?
So, I think I'll start with the negative. I think the reimbursement risk is real. And I think it just creates a lot of disruption because the only solve on the risk side is hospital, give me more money. And that's a hard place to be as a service provider. So I think, on the risk side, that means more insourcing. It also means more disruption. So I'm going to swap this group out for the other group who didn't actually do the math right. And that group's going to then ask for more money and swap out another group. So it just makes it a hard business to be in as an anesthesia provider. I think that's the risk. I think the opportunity is, I do think that to be successful in this space as a anesthesia company, you've got to focus on running anesthesia well. And honestly, very few groups have actually spent time doing that. So I think you're going to start to see people care a lot more about, hey, how do I win on making my environment better than somebody else's environment? And I think that creates more flexibility for people. I think it creates a lot more opportunities. And I think, again, if you're a CRNA coming out of school, the future is bright. It's going to be a great place to operate.
Well, I'm just listening to you talk, and the one word that just popped up in my mind was commodity. Is anesthesia becoming a commodity?
I think that in the world where you've just got a bunch of groups that are just looking at the math, yes.
Okay.
I think if you actually look at, if anesthesia groups focus on where am I adding value beyond just providing anesthesia,
right,
there's huge value you can provide.
Right. Okay.
We know more than anybody else how the operating room works. So when we're having those conversations about bring out more points of service, less models, the right model, that's all value that we can add that hospitals can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
Blocks, you can you can be getting through more cases, you can be caring for patients better. There's a lot clinically that we could be doing that we're not as a profession that can also add that value. So I think, sometimes you get stuck in this, hey, there's commoditization of this because this is the price and that's what it is. But there's a lot of differentiation.
So your job is becoming harder is what I'm hearing you say.
It's interesting that you use the word commodity. And when you said that, what strikes me is because there's a fundamental supply-demand imbalance of CRNAs and anesthesiologists. And group success used to be based on their ability, as we talked about, their ability to win on price. That's gone. And now I think there's a realization that you can't treat CRNAs as a commodity. I mean, there's groups that are doing it, don't get me wrong. And the troops that will say like, hey, actually, this is a valuable resource for us, a valuable asset. And we know that 85%, a number I just made up, but 85% of the success of our company is going to be based on our ability to recruit and retain CRNAs and anesthesiologists. And we need to create a culture, and we need to have the rigor around that to do it successfully. That's nothing but good for CRNAs. And you're seeing this. You're seeing groups embrace culture and scope of practice and putting leaders, CRNAs in key leadership positions. Those groups are going to win. Full stop. The groups that aren't able to adapt from treating CRNAs as commodities to treating them as a key strategic resource, well, you see what's happening right now. And so I think that I'm excited about that. I'm pro-competition. Let's go. We're going to win some, we're going to lose some, but I'm willing to take a bet on us and other groups, not just us, but other groups who are willing to make that transformation. And I think that's net positive for CRNAs.
No, I agree. And it's hard, back to that point, and I kind of led you into that a little bit, but I mean, when you've got a supply-demand imbalance, it's hard to have a commodity. You've got to figure out how to work in it. But I mean, the money is the commodity here. We've got this finite pie, but yet you still have to continue to feed it. I mean, it's a difficult problem. Mm-hmm. So, all right, Randy, tell us the good stuff. What are the opportunities here?
Well, maybe to double down a little bit on my last comment. So I've been a CRNA for a few minutes now. I don't know, like 20 years, I guess. It's unbelievable. And I went through stages of, I was a practicing CRNA, I was a leader, then I was a non-practicing CRNA, and now I'm practicing a little bit as a CRNA. And, the last year or so, I've been back in the clinical environment, which has been a breath of fresh air for me as a leader, as an executive, and as a CRNA. And despite some of the annoying things that we all feel about early career folks, I am very positive and bullish on, like, if you walk around here and you meet the caliber of SRNAs.
Absolutely.
They're like, these people are phenomenal.
They are.
I had a conversation just 30 minutes ago or 45 minutes ago with the SRNA. She stumped me on a business question. And so these are sophisticated, highly impressive individuals, and I'll place a bet on that. So I think the profession's fine. I think the folks who are following us are better than us and smarter than us and more prepared and honestly more sophisticated than we were, or at least me. Let's say that. And so I think that's great. And so, and my oldest daughter, I just dropped off at college, and she wants to be a CRNA, and if that was a problem, I would tell her. And so, despite some of the headwinds we've been talking about, I'm very bullish on the profession.
I think that's a great way to wrap it. I mean, I agree with you. I think the profession is very bullish. I think there are obviously underlying problems, as we've talked about. But I think you've got the right people in the right seats in a lot of avenues, the ANA being one of those, to kind of handle these problems and work through them. And, it's good to hear your take on this. Sharon?
I think it's a wrap, Jeremy.
Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Mask. If you enjoy the show and want to help us grow, the best way to support us is simple. Leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, share the show on social media, and tell your friends. Your word of mouth is what keeps us going strong. We're proud to consistently rank in the top 50 medical podcasts nationwide and to be #1 in the CRNA community. All thanks to listeners like you. Your support helps us stay there, and we couldn't do it without you. We'll see you on the next Beyond the Mask.